What are the main ethical implications of using AI for research, especially considering concerns such as misinformation and false referencing?
Einmal.
Balkans Calling. Voices from the region.
Welcome to the new episode of Balkans Calling, Voices from the Region. Today we'll explore the topics of academic writing and more generally communicating science. We actually have two guests joining us today. Katarina Damčević, a research associate at the Leibniz Institute for East and Southeast European Studies, will be stepping in as our moderator. Welcome, Katarina. And she'll be talking with Professor Djuddah Leijen from the University of Tartu, a linguist and expert in academic communication and writing pedagogy. Together, they'll explore what makes academic writing effective, and I hope they will share practical tips for presenting research clearly and with impact, because impact is always important. So whether you're a student, researcher, or just curious about academic communication, stick around. There is a lot to learn.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the introduction, and I'm again happy to welcome Djuddah as our guest this week. So, Djuddah, for the past 3 days, you have been giving a workshop on AI and its relation to writing. How can it help us? But also, what are some methodological and ethical implications? So, my first question to you would be, what sparked your interest in the use of AI tools like ChatGPT for research and writing? And as a follow-up, could you share any specific project where you've integrated AI into your workflow?
Well, thank you very much, Katarina. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me here to Regensburg to talk about and to work with the graduate students on writing and artificial intelligence. When did I start with artificial intelligence? I think overall I've always been interested in the influence that technology has had or has on writing in general. And this kind of technology could be related to a pen as a technology, and writing itself, of course, is a technology, but also on specific applications and apps that are available for students to try and improve their writing skills, or just to make the writing a little bit more systematic. And I think maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a research project, an ERC, which was related to the influence artificial intelligence was going to have on writing, or how it actually was going to change, in my perception, the research article. So is the future of the research article actually going to change? And I still think, and I think, that it will. So this is a little bit how I feel that I would like to implement it in my practical work as well. And that practical work is then working with the communicating science course at the University of Tartu, and helping our PhD students at the University of Tartu to think about and implement various tools and applications to develop their writing competences. Because I think that still is the core emphasis that students need to develop their competencies, and they can or cannot use artificial intelligence to emphasize this. So it's both implemented in both research projects, where I think it will serve in order to understand what the, let's say, gains and losses are going to be, and at the second application would be just on a practical level to have a research informed approach to teaching academic writing with or without the integration of artificial intelligence.
Thank you. So exactly this topic raises a lot of questions, and during these past 3 days we have heard students really raised so many concerns, so many issues, but also inspiration that they've had. And also thanks to your contribution. So actually along those lines, and in your view, what are the main ethical implications of using AI for research, especially considering concerns such as misinformation and false referencing? So for instance, for me, actually it was news recently, since I do not actively use ChatGPT, that it also generates, false references. So what might be, your view, and specifically, how do you think researchers can navigate these challenges?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important question, and again a very, I suppose, a very balanced question in terms of how we look at writing itself. So of course you give the example of an artificial intelligence hallucinating and giving false sources. I mean, in a way that if we look at it from the perspective of, let's say, writing before artificial intelligence. I mean, there have always been cases where students either miscited a source or not included a source when a source should have been included. So in a way, it's this kind of like surface level implications, which of course are also ethical by nature in this case. So how do we make sure that students understand how we deal with sources, and therefore also make them understand how an artificial intelligence deals with sources? Because actually an artificial intelligence doesn't deal with sources. It doesn't understand sources. So I think that's maybe the first ethical implication. But it's, I think, a fairly surface level application when it comes to ethical approaches of writing. I think the biggest concern would be related to, what do we give away to an artificial intelligence, and how ethical is that, right? In terms of, how much of the thinking do we give away to an artificial intelligence? And that of course, for me, has a much larger ethical implication in terms of what are the long-term consequences. How do we, determine whether a text has actually been processed by a human mind in some ways, or how well has it been processed through a strong engagement of a writer? And in this case, a PhD student or a doctoral student. So that would be the most important concept and idea that we need to get across first in order to tackle that ethical concern primarily before we even start talking about, let's say, the surface levels issues that an artificial intelligence provides.
So maybe at this point, what also drew my attention recently, we were talking a bit about teachers' bias, right? So teachers and educators can have biases that also influence student work. So how do you think the introduction of AI tools might exacerbate or mitigate these biases in the classroom setting?
Yeah, this is again something that we see more often at the moment, because of course it hasn't been a very long time since artificial intelligence has really, stormed on the scene, and we all need to deal with it, and we all, in terms of educators, teachers, instructors, students, writers, publishers, etc. And of course that some people are very open. So let's say the early adopters, they really, really want to see what they can take out of it. And then of course you have those people who are really very critical and skeptical about, what it does. And they might read some things about it. They might read a lot of reports in research journals or even in Nature, where, where the headlines say, okay, well, artificial intelligence creates sources or are, they are harmful for our discipline or are going to take over our jobs. And of course that creates these kind of biases as well. And as a result, students might be enthusiastic, follow specific guidelines that are being set by departments or institutions or universities on how they need to implement it in their work. whereas the readers, so let's say the evaluators, so the instructors or let's say thesis committees who will then review them, will then all of a sudden see, okay, well, there's something in that text which seems to be off, then it must be an artificial intelligence. So that it's this very, very strong confirmation bias that if somebody already has a negative view towards it, then if there is something in the text which seems off, then right away it's going to be as a result of artificial intelligence. Interestingly enough, there's some research coming out which actually highlights that it's really difficult for people to determine whether a text has been written by an artificial intelligence or not. And as a result, we need to be very, systematic in our approach to instruct both teachers and students about what can and cannot be done using artificial intelligence for text, because the detection of it is going to be just based on our own biases, positively or negatively.
Thank you. So, of course, as you've said, you've started to work on this specific topic more actively a couple of years back. But of course, you're an academic writing researcher, and there are many activities that you have been active on, many courses, many projects, and basically the different initiatives to support writing. So along those lines, I would switch to the role of AVOC, or basically the Center for Academic Writing and Communication at the University of Tartu, that you're also heading and that I'm also happy to be a part of since 2015. So the story, I think, is very interesting and very important. So could you maybe tell us a bit about founding the Center for Academic Writing? So basically, what prompted it? What was the inspiration behind it, or the need behind it?
So when we first started, it was as a result of the courses that I taught when I came at the University of Tartu, which were focusing on academic writing. And the approach was quite revolutionary, although I don't want to use that term in a way which really sounds like, I was doing something which was completely new. But it was quite revolutionary at the University of Tartu. So how we talk about writing, how we approach writing, and actually how to make it approachable was something which was very much needed. And this is something that we see quite a lot in not only at the University of Tartu, but actually in many European universities. So writing centers are not very common. They are extremely common in the United States. So that model is something that we can adopt quite readily, although our needs are fairly different than the needs in the United States. So I think that was a little bit the kind of inspiration. So the way that we taught writing was in the inspiration, and then following that model of the United States to implement it at the University of Tartu was then the second inspiration. And so together with colleagues, we thought, okay, well, let's create a center, with the idea that we are going to implement a model where we train tutors, which we started to call consultants. And of course, you were one of the first writing consultants that joined the center, who would then start to support other students who were working on their bachelor, master, and PhD theses. And that worked quite well at the beginning. I think there was a large enthusiastic group of people to work with it. And of course, the other thing that we really wanted to do was to also become a little bit like language independent, because our location was in the language center. And we didn't want to focus on language. So we wanted to focus on writing. So writing is not an issue of language. So writing is an issue of how do we construct text? How do we think about text? How do we approach text? How do we feel about writing as well, right? So it also has this kind of like soft approach. And consultants were, great to help and support students in this aspect. And then we expanded. We developed and created bootcamps, which you also really helped and worked with. And from there we just grew and grew and grew until that point where the university said, okay, well, is it necessary? maybe not in that way to ask that question whether it was necessary, but basically where people were becoming maybe a little bit skeptical about what it is that we're doing, and so we needed to justify ourselves a lot more, and the work that we did, because of course we were not paid. That's maybe another thing to mention here. That was a very important part. So if we wanted to continue, funding was necessary because it was just a model which was not sustainable. And it was difficult. So the only place where we could find funding was in research. And we decided that that's maybe the best way to go forward. And that's a little bit, let's say, the origin story of AVOC, where we really started very much from a practical problem. How do we support writers? To a more specific problem, how do we actually talk about and how do we make writing? How do we situate writing as a real discipline within the university, so that anybody who asks us about, okay, well, what are you doing? That we are saying, okay, well, we are really looking at better understanding what kind of issues writers have, not only in, let's say, English, but also in Estonian and the different disciplines, et cetera, et cetera. So we needed that research base and research approach as well for AVOC. And so that's the primary origin story. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, the story has so many layers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's it's certainly worth the initiative, and I agree. We have been together pursuing this goal of either advancing the establishment of writing labs and writing centers, or at least writing activities that support this. And I think, to a large degree, we have been also successful. So there is a lot of inspiration for sure. So, maybe when we see this evolving landscape of research and writing, and also related to AI tools, right? How do you see the Center for Academic Writing and Communication developing further? Do you have any goals in mind, or maybe simply ideas that you would like to pursue?
I have dreams, but I suppose that many of those dreams are founded in very, very, practical solutions, I suppose. So, of course, that in AVOC we developed quite a lot of interventions, as we call them, like a bootcamp, like shut up and write sessions. And in combination with research, I think that dream would be specifically now related with artificial intelligence, is to make sure that we keep talking about writing as something which is an essential component for all university students to develop and to not hand over to an artificial intelligence. I think maybe one of the concerns that we have is that artificial intelligence is going to make certain tasks easier, because a ChatGPT, for example, is such a confident writer. And in a way, it's so easy to hand over that kind of writing to a technology. We do this every day, right? So if we want to cook food, we can put our food in a microwave. And it's so much easier to heat up our food in a microwave than it is, for example, in an oven, which might take a little bit longer, or to cook a whole new meal, right? So that parallel, I think, is there as well with artificial intelligence, specifically for students if they are not introduced to why we write, or what is the purpose of writing, or why we struggle with writing, why it's also such a difficult endeavor. I think the role of a writing center like AVOC is even more important, and what we are trying to do is to sell that message as well to the central administration of our university, through development funds, saying, okay, well, if we want to further enhance critical thinking, scientific thinking, through writing, and the inclusion of artificial intelligence, we as a center, I think, are quite centrally positioned, because we actually can tap into all of the different disciplines, right? So we work with the humanities, we work with the social sciences, medical sciences, and etc. So that, I think, helps helps our positioning, and in my opinion, puts us in a very advanced place to help students to understand the role of artificial intelligence in learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this actually makes me think of the communicating science course that you or we have been involved in since 2018. Mm-hmm. That started up as a project, mm-hmm. right? And based on what you were saying now, and we have discussed this week as well, so we need to ensure that there is this balance mm-hmm. Between providing the students with the environment to write, mm-hmm. so sort of this learn by doing. Mm-hmm. However, as you pointed out really well, this is not enough, right? Mm-hmm. So, of course, we should all learn by doing, but at the same time, we also need to provide different programs, initiatives that actually help students develop certain skills mm-hmm. and capacities, right? So that's why I was reminded of the communicating science mm-hmm. course. So maybe you could tell us a bit about this specific course that was mm-hmm. designed for PhD students with some of these things in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think maybe one of the important components here is to try and distinguish two things. And this is something that we very much try to accomplish with communicating science. Related to writing, also to speaking, but in this case, it's, let's say, more applicable to writing for this talk. Mm. So yes, so we can look at academic writing as a skill, something that you can develop over practice by doing, but at the same time, that's maybe also where there is this misunderstanding. Where we think, okay, well, just as long as you keep doing it, mm-hmm. you will develop your skill as a writer. I don't believe it. Some do, but the missing component here is really developing knowledge about. Mm-hmm. And this is something that with communicating science, we really try to find a balance for students, so that the first thing that we do is we give them knowledge about texts. And specifically, of course, the kind of text that they need to write, which at the University of Tartu is journal articles for most of them in the different disciplines. Mm-hmm. And actually giving them awareness about, how they need to think about text. For example, the, rhetorical analysis mm-hmm. of text, genre analysis of text. There are many, many models out there, that will help them to definitely become a little bit more reflective as to what texts do. So what the purposes are of text, and to really lay this more theoretical foundation of the reason why they write, and how you can, through analysis and through knowledge, approach a text. And of course, that the more you approach it through that lens, the easier it becomes, because it just becomes part of your, let's say, skill set in this case. Mm-hmm. So that's where you have the transfer of knowledge, right? Transfer of knowledge from the things that you know about a text to you actually carrying it out, based on that very systematic approach. And so that's currently what we have always done with communicating science, and of course now with the integration of artificial intelligence also in communicating science. Artificial intelligence, I think, provides a great partnership in order to help develop knowledge of writing for PhD students or for researchers who are writing text. If we can enhance that part of writing, I think writers and PhD students will do quite well. Mm-hmm.
On that note, why do you think effective communication is crucial for scientists and researchers? Or maybe to narrow this down in a way, how has the communicating science course addressed the gap between scientific knowledge and public understanding?
Wow. I'm not entirely sure whether I can answer that question in full.
It's fine.
It's so difficult to answer, and I can perhaps answer it from a very idealistic perspective. Mm. which is that everyone who has taken the communicating science course, or everyone who has developed their skills as a communicating science communicator, let's say through our course, has become better. Because they have increased their knowledge, let's say they have practiced their skills over a period, and that period for the communicating science course is usually 3 months. Realistically, I'm not so sure. And I say this with the best intention, because I think, let me rephrase that. I know that it's a constant practice, meaning that if those students do not continue writing articles or do not continue to reflect on the things that they do, it is again something that they need to relearn. So, of course, when we talk about writing by doing, it is true because, of course, that you continuously need to develop your practice. So you can always become, let's say, a more proficient writer. So there isn't a ceiling. There isn't a point where you say, okay, well, now I'm a proficient writer. So the only way that we measure it is specifically in science is, okay, well, you've published so many articles. But, whether that's a good measure or not, it's very debatable. So that coming back to that realistic perspective, I do see a lot of students really, really excelling because they continue practicing it in their everyday life as a researcher. But I also see a lot of them actually not engaging with it enough. And that's maybe not any fault of their own. But it might be a fault of their, let's say, the research that they do. It might be as a result of the situation that they're in, so their private lives, for example. And of course, as a result, if that engagement is not there, then it just doesn't it doesn't develop as we ideally would want it to develop based on the goals and outlines that we have for the course. But I mean that's fine. I mean we know this. It's again we're setting very realistic goals, and we also hope that students will continue to return, and all of the incentives that we have developed, even things like bootcamps and those writing retreats again. If they come back, please do. We'll talk about it again, and we'll repeat it for you again. We'll give the models to you again. We'll support you, and just as long as we can. Help them, if they are seeking for help. I think, it's all for the better. Because, of course, that if they're somewhere all alone, hiding, without them actually talking about, the struggles that they have with writing, I think it becomes very, very difficult to help them to overcome those struggles. Because sometimes, they can be enormous.
Indeed, they can. And I've just recently conducted a small workshop for also equally small group of doctoral students that I'm working with on writing and emotional well-being, while centering it around social writing, right? And how the practice of social writing or writing together can actually help us, right? Also turn writing from a solitary experience into a joint one, build community, oftentimes also receive feedback, right? But also talk about our writing, learn from others. So all of these things that you have mentioned, and you've mentioned some activities such as writing retreats, boot camps. So maybe to start with an overarching question, what is social writing and how does it differ from traditional writing practices? So why do you believe social writing is important for academics and writers?
Yeah, I mean, again, wonderful question. I'm not entirely sure whether, let's say, traditional writing is not social writing. I think writing is inherently social because, of course, we are writing for an audience. And therefore, we are automatically interacting with people. Maybe the traditional role here is that we may not get immediate feedback from our text. I think the way that we look at it as well, and I suppose your workshops and I know your work around social writing is actually to make it. It's actually to open up that dialogue that writing actually is not a solitary practice. I think specifically in academia, and again, not everywhere, but in many places in academia, it seems that writing is a solitary activity. But that said, I know that there are a lot of departments or organizations, which will put people together and let them write together. So we can talk about these environments as being social environments for writing. I think in general, I mean, if these are things that we do, so why would we hide? Why would we hide doing this? Or the other thing that we can, how we can look at it is that, okay, well, if you go to work, and in this case, let's say we are in academia, our role is that we need to write articles. Let's say you are coming to the office and the only thing that you're doing the whole day is just writing, right? Is this you being productive? That's, always a question that we can ask, because it just looks like you're not doing anything, really. I mean, where's that article? Why is it not coming? Because you're spending so much time. And I think the social aspect here is actually that we can talk about these things, right? So just that we don't, that we understand the kind of struggles that we have, or the kind of wins that we have even in writing. That we see how others are approaching writing. That we can also tell them that this is the way that I'm approaching writing. So just that we see each other as writers, right? So we don't just say, okay, well, I'm a writer, but actually, yes, of course you're a writer. I can see that you're writing. So, I mean, this is maybe a little bit the way that I would frame it in that social space. But social space, of course, is in retreats, in bootcamps, in shut up and write sessions. And it's lovely. It's lovely to be amongst writers, right? And in this case, it's lovely to be amongst colleagues and Absolutely. Doctoral students and researchers who are just carrying out their task of writing texts. So the sound of ticking keyboards and mind thinking is for some people inspirational. Of course, I have to add that for some people it also can become quite difficult to see that some people are very, let's say, productive, and I put productive in between air quotes here, which you can't see. But that's also part of, I think, the social environment, that if you see that others are productive and you have a bad feeling about it, let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've recently, for instance, at the iOS started our Shut Up and Write sessions. So for now, they take place twice a month on Thursdays. And exactly, it's an open space with a structured schedule. We have goal setting, reflection, but it is really nice to be among people, write and then chat in between, just learn more about what other people are doing. And when you mentioned this solitary experience in a way of an office, although I really do like my office, having worked at home for such a long time, as I've told you, hearing somebody else type, I love that sound, which is actually why I leave my door open, because I often hear other people typing, and it's just in a way even soothing, right? It does something. But I would conclude our talk with the last question, still in the realm of social writing. So how do you think writers can balance the benefits of collaborative writing environments with the need for solo writing and focus? This is something that I have been hearing a lot, and this meaning that some people might not want to partake in those collaborative writing environments because they feel like, this is not for me. I want to be alone. But how to balance this?
I think the answer is fairly simple in the way that I look at it. And I'm not suggesting that it's simple, but that actually, if we think about what we do, so actually the various components of writing, so it's not just one thing, which of course writing somehow seems to suggest, so it's one word describing activity, but that activity actually consists of many different things. And because it consists of many different things, Some of those things work really well within a social environment, and that could be, for example, a focused time to write. But that, of course, could also be something else, right? So that focused time to write could also be solitary activity. So it depends on the person what really helps. What helps them to settle into a specific task. And I think that if you understand this, then you can build a balance and actually plan it and organize it very, very, very easily. So that's why I think I say that the solution in some ways is very simple. But what it does is it needs a person to be able to understand what component of a text or what component of writing they are going to work on. Is it drafting? Is it outlining? Is it revising? Is it just, crossing the T's and dotting the I's? Is it reading, for text, or is it synthesizing, etc.? So sure, some of those things can be done like in half an hour in a solitary environment, or in a social group. And of course, this is what we see with those various interventions as well. So bootcamps are really great for people who just need space and time to think. And space and time to think is such an important aspect of writing. And we know that, for example, a bootcamp is great for people who are just pushing deadlines, and they just need to focus and just let me sit down and let me do the things that I need to do. Yeah. Other people are good or have the self-discipline to do this at home. I don't. So if I'm on a crunch, I will seek people that are going to help me to push that crunch. So to the deadline. Yeah.
Which I think is a really important point. And we have mentioned this, I think, so many times throughout the years, for students to always try out different models, right? So we've never imposed those models on them. When I say models, I mean, writing retreats or writing groups or shut up and write, but try them out. And exactly see what works for you. Because in some stages of your writing, something else will work. There are stages where you would want to be alone, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, as you said, like it's rather simple. It seems simple, right? But I guess it's also about learning about how you work, how you approach writing at different stages.
Yeah, and this is where writing consultants or people who know a lot more about how writing works, like yourself, are so incredibly valuable to work with, specifically for let's say doctoral students who really are maybe a little bit lost on how to approach things. Sometimes our supervisors are maybe not the best ones to tell us what we need to do. Some supervisors, of course, are, but having somebody in a group who can at least, present this in a very simple and clear fashion and help them to try different things out, I think it's so important.
On that positive note, I would again thank you, Djuddah, for visiting us. It was a pleasure having you this week. And as you have heard from many people, many colleagues and students, we really look forward to another visit, and hopefully we will set this up very soon. I know I will personally do my best to do so. So again, thank you for this talk today, and hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, well, likewise. So thank you very much for the invitation. And it was an absolute pleasure to work with the students here. And hopefully it has been useful and that they will move forward with the challenges that they have set for themselves based on the course. So thank you.
Thank you, Djuddah.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check the episode description. You'll always find our latest podcast recommendation there. See you next time.